Well, hello and welcome to another edition of More Perfect Marketing, the live edition. We're just getting going here, and I'm pleased to welcome my colleague, AJ Saunders, who is joining me from across the pond and probably just coming out of another meeting. So let's
Correct.
get into things. Today, I want to talk a little bit about an experience I had yesterday. So I spent my day at a conference that was put on by the state of Oregon, not teaching, but giving access to small businesses um, who were interested in working with public agencies. And so it was I don't know, a thousand or so attendees and a lot of different departments of the state and a couple of local cities and counties, all talking about how you can do business together. Obviously, a lot of the folks were in things like construction and other areas where there's obvious opportunities for a business to get contracted by a public agency. And then there are businesses like ours. We are consultants. We come in and we work through process. We help strategize. We figure out how to improve positioning. Now, a lot of what we do happens to really be designed around for-profit entities, a business that's trying to get in front of a consumer. You have an offer for a product or a service. And I was thinking about this idea of how do we translate our skill set, what we do, the value of what we have, and put it in front of these public agencies, and how do I talk about it in a way that A, they go, ooh, I need that, and B, that it makes sense, right? Or probably the other way around, right? That it makes sense what we're doing, and that applies to them. There's often a phrase that I hear when I'm in mastermind meetings, and somebody is sitting on what's proverb I can't even speak today, proverbially known as a hot
Great.
right. So this
Great.
is an idea that somebody comes to a group, they say I have a problem, and then the group helps them work through a problem. And often, you'll have folks who are sitting there going, their problem is so alien to me. I don't have that situation in my world. I'm not familiar with what they're even trying to solve because it's not a situation that I've ever encountered or ever will encounter. And yet, the advice for those who are reacting that way is don't don't just reject the premise of the conversation. There's value in hearing what is being discussed, but here's the lens through which you should look at it. Not this doesn't apply to me, but rather ask the question, how can this apply to me? And so really what I'm talking about is how do we as businesses think about it from the reverse position? How can we make the value that we have as a business, whatever we're offering, a product or a service, apply to a specific audience out there, even when what we do isn't necessarily built for them in the first place? So that's sort of what's been going on inside my mind for the last I don't know, half a day since I got back from this event, and I thought I would share some of those thoughts with you folks today. Hey AJ, I've now explained the premise, the concept of
Fantastic.
what I want to spend the next 20 or so minutes on. Any gut reactions, any feelings about what you've heard, and whether it's an easy, difficult problem to work through, obvious, not obvious. What are your immediate takeaways from the
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing that I've been thinking about for the last kind of year, and this may just because I've done far more consulting in the last year than I've done before, is the universal truth of problem solving, and just how ineffective the education system is at training us to solve problems. We're taught how to remember things at rote, or how to process information and then regurgitate, but we're not told how to have frameworks or frameworks. Like we talk about all the time between me, you, and Ken, of how to actually problem solve. And I feel that that's actually very, very telling when it comes to business, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of small business owners haven't developed that mechanism of, right, the problem is X. How can we? What routes up the mountain can we take to solve those problems? And I think the smart money we like is on not solving the problem, but the methodology you use to solve the problem, or the methodology you could use to solve the problem, and how that kind of bears out in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the more time I think about how can I solve problems, the more people I talk about how to solve the problems, not solving the problems, but how to. The better I think I become as a consultant, the better I become as a business person, and the better, the more empathetic I become as a human. Right? Because I don't see things as a challenge. I think things as an opportunity to think of a different way of finding a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, makes I think you pointed the finger at the education system, and the education system, in general, has a lot of things to do, right? Because there's a very wide range of um, destinations that
Yeah.
people have, right? Um, but there isn't, I think, clear preparation for the majority of people who go into business ownership or running an organization about how to actually do those jobs. And I think that's probably um, a more appropriate area for us to focus on for the next little while. Um, I think the guy who highlighted this most um, effectively back in the 1970s in the small business space was a guy named Michael Gerber, who wrote this book and an entire series called the E-Myth books. And the idea is that there's this entrepreneurial myth that you have a skill set or a knowledge base or a capability, you go out and you start a business around it, and you have a great success. And the reality is that you are really good at the delivery of the thing, but you may not be good at building the I'm going to use the word framework again, but the structure. That's probably a better word,
The structure. Yeah.
around that expertise or around that value to have a business that has success, sustainability, profitability, all the things that we want from our business. A quick anecdote about one of the many business owners I chatted with yesterday at this event. He was a guy who is in the landscaping business, and he does some construction as well. And I said to him, "Oh, cool. Do you do that for commercial or residential?" "Yeah, both. We do both. We do everything." I said, "Oh, okay. So you're here looking for government work. Have you done government work before?" Um, yeah, I've done, I've bid for a bunch of things, and I haven't ever gotten any jobs. I said, okay, so what is the thing that separates you from others that you're putting in front of them that would help them uh, pick you? Is it your pricing? Is it the experience of the types of jobs that you've had? Well, we do it all. We can do everything. We can do anything you give us. And I said, look, that's all well and good. As a marketer, I cringe when I hear that, and a lot of business owners who I say this to, they go, "Why? Why would you cringe? I can do anything," because that's an area they haven't been trained to think about. Is the positioning of your business needs to be distinctive enough, not looped in with everybody else who does what you do. And so we had a chat about, I guess, going back to the premise that I shared at the beginning of the call, which is how can you um, talk about what you do in a way that is dialed in specifically for the person you're talking to on the other side. And so we had a conversation about what if he was um, careful to highlight certain aspects of his business when he's bidding for the next job, so that he is more likely to be chosen based on the criteria he knows is important to the agency that has that bid open. And he was like, "Wow, that's a totally different way of thinking about it. I never really thought that there was, any specific thing I needed to think about. I just needed to tell them that I exist. I mean, that's not what he said, but you get the idea. That reaction that he had was like, this is an epiphany, and for you and me, this is like,
This is child's play.
this is baseline.
This
But
is child's play. Yeah.
but we all have our areas of knowledge. This happens to be our area of knowledge,
Yeah.
in an area that we can impart, great value to those we work with.
Yeah, and the analogy that comes to mind, and I know you like your food, so I'm going to use a food analogy. It's why do people go to a Chinese buffet and walk away discontent, and why do people go to a Michelin star restaurant and walk away very happy? Both are going to feed you suitably. Well, for argument's sake, let's just say both will feed you suitably, but the experience and the level of detail and the level of understanding and the level of food and the quality is going to be completely different at Michelin star than it is at buffet.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the price point, right? And so for me, it's how can you be very singular focused on, right, we do X for Y, right? And for me, that's not about niche, it's about solving a problem. I'll say that again. For me, it's not about having a niche, it's about solving a problem. Versus saying, well, the image that I get when I think about people who do everything, I think about, the Prohibition era people with all the big long coats, all the liquor in their coats, and they go, well, what do you want? Right? And they start pulling out bottles, right? None of them taste good, but at least they've got something for everybody, right? And it's that whole, again, it's the buffet example. And so for me, it's about telling the truth attractively in a way that gets you to get them to ask you that next question.
Okay.
And by saying, and the example that comes to mind, this is a bit of a crass example, so I'm going to apologise in advance. And this is my story, and I really wish it was my story, but this is my story. There's a divorce lawyer in Scotland whose his pitch is, there are people in this room who are having an affair, who've had an affair, or are about to have an affair. I want to talk to them today so I can protect them from what's going to happen. His pitch. He does not stand up there and say, well, I'm a divorce lawyer and here's how I can protect you and here's what you're thinking about, right? He's very, very to the line. Obviously, some people don't like that. Some people do. I remember is it our marketing book or is it in it's in one of our books? You talk about the financial advisor who stood up after 13 other financial advisors and said, you're right, I'm also a financial advisor, but I specialize in doing X, Y, and Z. So if you haven't thought about A, B, C, I'd love to talk to you after. And that was the guy that had the long line of people, right?
Yeah.
And it's just he thought about what he was doing in a slightly different way that allowed him to become really attractive in that situation and to spark curiosity that other people didn't. And I'm pretty sure if you spoke to that guy again, who you spoke to yesterday, and you said, what are the jobs you A, enjoy the most and then B, the most profitable? He would know exactly who he liked working for and what he liked doing. And that we could then focus his business around doing those sorts of activities as a majority and do some other things to keep him interested, right? But focus, and that he would have a much better, more profitable life, right? And he'd be much happier because he was optimizing for things that he enjoyed doing at a payment rate that was acceptable, and that actually would create, a much better opportunity for him to be able to get better jobs.
Yeah, there's a lot that I think, as you pointed out, you can build on top of that specificity, right? And
Yep.
so, um, going back to this guy, well, by the way, that example that you just gave about the financial advisor, that is in our book. It's a book that we'll share with folks at the end of the
I just want to prove
today.
once for all I did actually read the book. It's
Well,
not just my name on it. I actually read
as a co-author, I would
exactly,
hope that you
exactly.
at least read it. But it's the prepared marketing system, and it's really
Yeah.
talking about our approach to building on a foundational idea that if you are distinctive in one way or another, right, in the eye of the market that you're trying to sell to, that then there are things you can build on top of that to really dial in the value of your business and how it's different from others, and the way that you deliver is really specified around the audience that you're going after, the problem that you were solving, and the things that you include in what you do are really built around that specific audience and that specific need. And it may be a slight tweak or a slight variation of what the guy down the street does, but because you articulate it specifically to that audience and talk about it in the terms of what you're solving, there is a perceived value of, this is exactly what I, the consumer, am looking for. My money's going with them. And that's I think the lesson there is, when you make some very clear and simple decisions. Now these are I say simple, but they're really hard to make, particularly because it's counterintuitive. You think, if I'm saying I'm not for everybody, I'm just for these people, or I'm just for this type of situation, or I'm just solving this problem, even though my product or service can solve many problems, you think that that means I'm going to lose out on lots of business. And it's actually the other way around. By saying I can do anything, you're losing out on much more business than you ever would if you specify what you do.
Well, my argument in tandem with that is, I think as human beings, we like the simplicity of being able to remember, right, David does ABC. And so if you say, well, I do everything to do with building, that's too complicated for somebody to remember.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, right, I only work on roofs in historic homes, that's far easier for you than to be out in, to be walking around in life and think, oh, there's a roof, and then there's a problem. They need David, right? I think that then becomes, right, we know David can do X, Y, and Z, and that's what you then phone David for. And I think that becomes much easier than thinking, well, he can do any type of building.
You're reminding me of something that we're in political season right now,
Indeed.
and so this is a something that's working really, really well in that arena, but it's also worked incredibly well in the business arena, which is repetition around a simple idea. Right?
Correct.
The more you say the thing over and over and over and over, the more people will associate you, or in the political world, the opponent, or in the business world, the competition, with an idea that you want to get in the public's head. And this actually can work positively and negatively, as in politics. I'll give you an example of how it works negatively in again, from yesterday. So that I am deeply involved in an organization here in Oregon called OWAMI, the Organization of Minority Entrepreneurs. And I am featured a lot in the meetings there around one particular topic, a particular topic that I'm very interested in, but it's actually not what I do, right? So I have been asked to get up and talk about artificial intelligence in front of this community numerous times. I probably have done it 10 or more times at big meetings filled with hundreds of people, right? And when I'm outside of that room and people see me, they don't think, oh, David, the marketing strategy guy, the copywriter, the strategic advisor and consultant, all of the things which I do, right? None of those things come up in somebody's mind.
Yeah.
And instead, what they say is, oh, David, the AI guy. And now I have to figure out, how do I extract myself from that, holding that position in their mind, and instead highlight what I want them to believe about me, which is, I come into businesses, or in the case of state agencies, or whatever other audience I'm in front of, and I solve the problems of not being able to achieve the revenue goals, the marketing goals that you have set out for yourself. And build out a framework for walking through and working toward the solution to that problem, right?
Yeah.
That's what I want people to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big challenge, and I think a lot of people have, and a lot of businesses have a similar challenge. Maybe not the same scenario that I have, but a business that has been um, identified by the public based on being the cheapest option, right? They don't want to be the cheapest option, but they've claimed that because they talk about having sales all the time or being, the lowest price on a particular
Right.
product. And then they use that again on another product, right? And suddenly everybody thinks of them as the best place to go for cheap stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think if you're not intentional about what you want people to remember you for, as you're well saying, people then attach their own meaning. And I know one brand that we talk about a lot behind the scenes is Subaru. And Subaru spent was it $1 billion in the 90s, claiming that they were the safest car and building that position thereabouts, right? And I think they want to be remembered for being a very safe car, right?
And
And
mind
so
you, they were coming into the market with a different car that had already claimed that space in the consumer's mind, which was
yeah,
Volvo,
which is
and so
Volvo, yeah,
they had their work cut out for them.
yeah, exactly. And so for me, it's how can you intentionally and slowly, methodically change the mind of the consumer to be around the value proposition that you're bringing to the market, versus allowing them to attach meaning that isn't top down. I can give you an example. There's a company called Osprey London. I regularly bring them up. Not, I bought a belt from them last year. Fantastic belt, polo belt, absolutely wonderful. I love it to pieces. Wear it fairly frequently. But every starting day they email me with another discount, and so I'm constantly thinking, right, is today going to be the day when they offer me 90% off everything?
Mhm.
And for me, they've diluted the brand value that they could have created, and they could have had in my brain and in my mind by being, oh well, there's another luxury, quote unquote, luxury goods at a discount, right? We have TK Maxx, you have TJ Maxx, right?
Mhm.
It's the same sort of ideas, right? I can go buy a Hugo Boss belt for a fraction of the price that Hugo Boss are going to charge me at TK Maxx. And for me, I don't know whether they're doing that intentionally, but I do feel that it's actually harming them as a long-term revenue generational idea, that everything's on discount all the time, essentially.
Yeah.
Even if it's not, right? Because I know if I click through the site, there might be 10% of their products actually on discount and everything else is full price. But the perception that they created in my brain is everything is always discounted and always fair game.
We're getting into a little different territory, but I think that
We
this
are,
is
yeah.
this is a useful exercise because what we're talking about is being the low price leader is a
Yeah.
terrible way to position because there can only be one low price leader. And so then you have this challenge of trying to compete in that space. And what does that do for you? It then either means that you're di- dishonest about the
Mm.
way that you're you know presenting yourself, creates disappointment, and it trains an audience, as the example with Osprey London. It trains an audience to say, I'm interested in buying from you, but only when the thing that I want to buy is on sale. And what does that do then for your revenue and your profitability? It disrupts your ability to make sales at the margin that you deserve to be making the sales, and and maintaining or creating and maintaining a relationship with your buyer that's based around something other than price.
Yeah. And the other example that pops into my brain, and this is a bit left field, is IKEA. It's very affordable. Me and you might say cheap, right? But it's also at the same time very bland. It's very obvious it's IKEA furniture. And I think that's that's maybe what they want to achieve, but I think at the same time it harms what they could have become because everyone thinks, well, it's cheap and it's not going to last, and it looks it's identical homes, right? Everyone looks the same.
I,
I
I
do
would I
think,
would actually disagree with the point that it harms anything for IKEA, because I think IKEA is highly successful,
oh,
has a
absolutely,
clear
absolutely,
position in the market, and is making, money hand over fist. So I don't think, and they are um a brand that some people hate, which is great, right? Because
right, 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 right.
it then claims a position that we're not for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, I think IKEA is a wonderful business, and I think logistically, about how they think about logistics is supersedes, I think, 99% of any other business, right?
Mhm.
I know that sounds like a bold claim, and so I think there's loads we can learn from IKEA, but I also think that there is a blandness and sameness that comes from having everyday low pricing, as Mr. Walton would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't know that that's our position.
right, right, right.
Because they're certainly not the cheapest option out there.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think their position is usually um, affordable, which I don't think is
Affordable, right?
cheapest, right?
Okay, that's fair.
Affordable, and you build it yourself, which is
Yeah,
why it's affordable.
yeah.
At least the furniture stuff. I mean, there's all these other add-ons, and I would imagine that their profit center is kind of like the same concept that Costco has, right? You come into their building, you are trapped in that environment, you're presented with all kinds of perceived deals, some of which are much more profitable for the business than others, and they are making up money that gets lost on a loss leader with lots of other stuff.
Well, I say that their store design again is remarkable because I think,
Yeah.
like you're saying, it's designed to make you purchase things that you never normally think about
Mhm.
in a very logical order. So you go through and you think, well, I need a wardrobe, and then you think, well, I then need some interior space saving devices,
Yeah.
whatever they're called, right? And then you think, oh well, if I'm going to do that, then I want some plants to go on top of the right, and then I need a little table to go next to it, and etc. 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 And so now I think they are really clever in how they've thought and how they've pieced everything together.
Well, so I think this takes us full circle, and we got to wrap up,
We have to,
because
yeah,
they have been very intentional in how they're showing up in front of the
yeah,
public,
yeah,
and are saying, "Hey, we're for you if long list of benefits. We're not for you if long list of reasons why. If you're a different type of shopper, you have different priorities. You're gonna shop somewhere else, and
yeah.
that's perfectly okay and appropriate and highly effective. So,
Mm.
okay, before we wrap up, I want to mention the book that you brought up earlier. It's called
Yep.
The Prepared Marketing System. The link to grab a free copy of the PDF version is right here on the screen. It's thepreparedgroup.com/book.
Yep.
I'll try to drop that in the comments for the live stream here on LinkedIn as well. And you can also pick it up at your local laptop via Amazon. And it's, again, called The Prepared Marketing
Marketing
System.
system.
All right. I'm David Baer. Thank you, AJ, for joining me. I
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. We'll see you all back here on another episode of More Perfect Marketing real soon. All right. Take care.